Hello everyone, welcome to PMFIS. I am Dr. Vishwjeet Kawar. In last lecture we have seen this Stone Age, right from Paleolithic, then Mesolithic and later Neolithic, all three phases of Stone Age. Today we will see this Chalcolithic Age or Chalcolithic culture. Some call it as a Chalcolithic or Chalcolithic. So what is special about this Chalcolithic? All their features we will see now. But remember, what is meant by this lithic? Lithic in the sense stone. What is meant by this chalco? Means copper. So in last lecture we have seen throughout this Stone Age culture, from Paleolithic, then Mesolithic and Neolithic, people were dependent on stone for any tools or implements. But now in this Chalcolithic age or Chalcolithic culture, they started using copper. Remember, suppose you are starting any mobile. I have started using mobile maybe around 2013 or 14. Then I was using mobile for very less time. But if you compare it now, I am using the mobile excessively. Similarly, during the initial phase, even during this Chalcolithic culture or Chalcolithic age, people using copper only in lesser amount. Means most of the times they were still dependent on the stone. So in this lecture we are going to cover this Chalcolithic culture. If you see this basic timeline from Paleolithic, from 6 lakh years ago or 6 lakh years BCE to 10,000 BC, we have this Paleolithic phase. From 10,000 BCE to 4,000 BC, we have this Mesolithic culture. From this 7,000 to 1,000, we have this Neolithic phase. So we have already seen why this Mesolithic and Neolithic, they were at the same time in different region, because sometimes in some region people still using this microlith, we called it as a Mesolithic culture, and in some region people were started using this polystone tool. So it's possible that at the same period in different region there may be different cultures. In today we are going to see this Chalcolithic culture, which starts around this 4000 till 700 BC. We are going to see this Chalcolithic culture. So in some places during this period people were using this microlith, we call this culture as a Mesolithic culture. In another region people may have used this polystone tools, we call this as a Neolithic culture. In some places people were using now the copper. Copper was the first metal used by human. It spanned from this Chalcolithic period, spans from 4000 BC to 700 BC. So basically for the first time humans started using this copper metal. So even during this period they were still dependent on the stone. So we call this as a copper stone phase or Chalcolithic culture or Chalcolithic period. If you see, even during this time they were dependent on three things. First, stone, second, copper, and third is water. So even during this time they did not settle in the alluvial plain, but they settle only in the hilly area where the stone is easily available and in the river valley where water is available. Chalcolithic sites are found in those parts where hilly land and river were available. So in most of the time, most of the sites are in the hilly area and river. Few sites like this Chirand in Bihar, these are in the alluvial plain. So most of the Chalcolithic cultures were flourished in the semi-arid regions of Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra. If you see, these are the Chalcolithic sites. But remember, these are not the Chalcolithic site, but Chalcolithic sites are much more. We have given only the important Chalcolithic site. They are found throughout the Indian subcontinent, but mostly concentrated in this Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and then Maharashtra. So in the semi-arid region, we are going to see the characteristics of this Chalcolithic. We have already seen this Mesolithic, then Paleolithic, then Mesolithic and Neolithic. In this we are going to start this characteristics of this Chalcolithic culture. If you see their sites, basically in Rajasthan, two important sites are Ahar and Gilund. Both are in Banas river valley or their tributary. We call this as a Ahar culture. If you see this in the Madhya Pradesh, there were many sites which are important. This Kaita site, this is on the tributary of this Chambal. We call it as a Kaitha culture, and other sites are Malwa, Nagda, Eran and Navdatoli. So all these are parts of Malwa culture. If you see this Maharashtra part, there is a Zorwe culture. Zorwe culture is very important for your exam, and their sites also we are going to see. In Zorwe culture, remember this Prakash site. This is on river Tapi. Then three important sites from this Pune region, Inamgaon, Chandoli and Songaon, all were in the Bhima river. If you see three important sites from the Ahmednagar or Ahilyanagar now, you find this Nevasa, Daimabad and Zorwe. All three were on the river Pravara, which is a tributary of river Godavari. So most of the sites are concentrated in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, means semi-arid region. There are also other important sites like Maski and Brahmagiri in Karnataka, similarly Chirandi in Bihar. So we are going to see these important sites and their culture. So if you see the common features of Chalcolithic culture, first of all, along with the stone tools, now they are using the copper. Remember, this is the first step when they are started using the metal. So basically this copper was not unlimited. So the copper was limited because of the scarcity of copper. They were still largely dependent on this stone, and mostly they use this microlith like blades. But copper was still limited. We have just seen these two sites, Ahar and Gilun. It is in the Rajasthan and near to this Khetri region, which was a source of copper. So Ahar and Gilun, these were important for the copper. Not only just copper, we have also found some bronze sheet, low grains bronze sheet in Ahar and Gilun. Next is their agriculture. If you see, during this Paleolithic and Mesolithic time, people were people were hunters gatherers. But during this Neolithic time, people started this agriculture. So in the next phase, that is in this Chalcolithic, people were still practicing subsistence agriculture, means not the surplus food grain production. Why not surplus food grain production? Because they are still not using any technology. These were the backward people in terms of technology, and they are, if you compare with the Neolithic phase, they are producing more cereals as compared to Neolithic, but still they are not producing any surplus food grain production. So they were just doing this subsistence agriculture. If you see domestication of animals, so we have already seen people practice this domestication from the Mesolithic also, but basically most of the times in the Neolithic culture. So even during this period, they were starting this, they were practicing this, continuing this domestication of animal. If there is a question whether they were acquainted or whether they were known about this horse, no, horse and cow, because horse and cow will come definitely during this early Vedic period. But during this time, I have already told you, these are technologically backward people, so they did not use any technology fully. So even during this time, when they were using these animals for the meat, means the domesticated animal, they were slaughtered for meat, but they did not use for the milk or dairy product. If you see, they don't have this surplus food grain production. If they don't have this surplus food grain production, they won't have any diversification in the work, there won't be any urbanization. So basically people have this rural background. But during this Neolithic period, people started settling in small villages. Now if you see the first village, it was during this Chalcolithic culture. But even in this case, in this Chalcolithic culture, some of the sites have almost reached urbanization, like Daimabad. So it reached this almost stage of urbanization, but not complete urbanization. So basically the background was rural. If you see this, they were still living in the hut or mud brick houses, means similar to this Neolithic phase. It is known for their painted ceramic, black and red pottery. So during this Neolithic phase, people started producing pottery, but these were not colored. Chalcolithic people were the first who used this colored pottery. Most common was black and red. If you see, we have found this mother goddess, we have found this bull, means they believed in this religion, they practiced this religion. If you consider these burial practices, this dead body was first placed in this urn, means pot. And if you consider this Western India, like Maharashtra, they buried along this north-south position. But if you consider Southern India, they buried in east-west position. East-west position. If you see this burial practices along with this body, along with this burials in the urn, they have placed sometimes maybe copper implements, something related to copper or other objects. And sometimes these copper objects are excessive, sometimes there may not be any copper object. This shows there was a social inequality. Along with this, if you see their settlement patterns, sometimes the settlement was large, sometimes the settlement was small, sometimes where they lived is in the hut and sometimes in the mud brick houses. All this shows their existence of this social inequality. If you see, their trade and commerce, yes, they traded, but they did not use any metal money. The trade was basically using this barter exchange. Now we are going to see some basic features. We have already seen this, but only now we will see this in the detail. So Chalcolithic people still were dependent on the stone tools, basically microlith, but they have started using these copper tools. Basically, if you see this Chalcolithic culture, it is focusing on copper plus stone, not bronze. But we have also found this low-grade bronze, where Ahar and Daimabad. We have already seen these are the sites from Rajasthan. So remember these two sites, Ahar and Daimabad, where we found this gold low-grade bronze. This Ahar is from Rajasthan and this Daimabad is from the Maharashtra, from Zorwe culture. During this Chalcolithic phase, supply of copper was limited. Why the supply of copper was limited? Copper was just discovered during this time, right? So supply was limited, and two sites from Rajasthan, Ahar and Gilund, they were the source of this copper for the other Chalcolithic sites. This painted ceramics, this was the most distinguished feature of this Chalcolithic culture. These are the people who first time used this painted pottery, and most common was black and red. If you see, in different culture they have used the different types of pottery. Like in Ahar culture they have used this white painted design, means already the pot was black and red, over and above they have this white painted design. If you see in the Kaitha culture, they have used this chocolate color design. So in the different culture they have used this different types of pottery. We have already seen they did this agriculture, but agriculture was not surplus. Why it was not surplus? Because they did not use any plough or hoe. So the agriculture was basically subsistence. Next is domestication of animals. Yes, they domesticated animal, but animals were not used for milk or any milk product. So they did not use animals for milk and milk product. Next is rural background. We have already know this during this Chalcolithic culture, all the villages or most of the villages were large. So they were the first people who built these large villages, but they haven't reached this urbanization. We have some sites which are near to this urbanization like Daimabad, but not the complete urbanization. If you see, most of the houses were either hut or mud brick houses. Trade and commerce, we have already seen they traded with other cultures within this Chalcolithic culture, but even during this trade they did not use any metal money. Burial practices we have seen in the Maharashtra, north south, in South India, east west. Next is settlement pattern. If you see settlement, there were two tier habitation, means sometimes the settlement was large, sometimes the settlement was small. If you see the different houses in the rectangular mud brick houses, it's quite possible that the chief or rich people lived, and in this hut, rounded huts, other means poor people lived. So there was a basically social inequality. If you see this settlement pattern and burial practices. Religious belief we have already seen, we have found this terracotta figurine of Mother Goddess. So next is we will see the basic important Chalcolithic cultures. First is Ahar culture, which is in the Rajasthan. Next is Jorwe culture from Maharashtra and Malwa culture from Madhya Pradesh. If you see this Ahar culture, two important sites are, one is Ahar and second is Gilun. Both are important as they are the source of copper. In Ahar, we have already found this low grade bronze. So located on this Banas river valley. One important thing is we haven't found any microlith tools from Ahar. Next is Malwa culture. If you see the Malwa culture, most of the sites like Navdatuli and all these are located on this Narmada river. Not most of the sites, but this important site Navdatuli is located on this Ahar. Why this Navdatuli is important? Even though during this Chalcolithic culture they were practicing this subsistence agriculture, they have cultivated more cereals than Neolithic site. If you consider this site Navdatuli, you can find almost all food grains found in this all Chalcolithic cultures. Means whatever food grain you found in this Chalcolithic cultures, all are found in this Neolithic site. Next important is Jorwe culture. Why Jorwe culture is important? It is most excavated culture among this Chalcolithic culture, and the largest settlement is Daimabad. And in this Daimabad and Inamgaon, these both sites are almost reached urbanization. Remember, they haven't reached complete urbanization, but they almost reach urbanization. And if you particularly see this Daimabad, we have found this low grade bronze goods. Bronze sheets we have found. If you chronologically classify these Chalcolithic settlements, so basically we have seen this Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic phase. Similarly, the Chalcolithic span from this 4000 to 700 BC. During this period from 4000 and 700 BC, there were different cultures exist in different part of India. In northern west part of India, from 2600 to 1900, there was existence of Indus Valley Civilization, or we call it as a Harappan culture. So we can divide these Chalcolithic cultures or settlements in pre-Harappan, Harappan and post-Harappan. Means before this Indus Valley Civilization or Harappan culture, we called it as a pre-Harappan Chalcolithic sites. During this time, Harappan Chalcolithic sites, and later on post-Chalcolithic sites, post-Harappan sites. So pre-Harappan, Harappan and post-Harappan. If you see all the Chalcolithic sites, most of the Chalcolithic sites are post-Harappan. But if you see technologically, they are pre-Harappan. Why technologically they are pre-Harappan? If you consider this Harappan civilization or Harappan culture, all this culture is urban. This culture is urban. But if you compare it with this Chalcolithic site, Chalcolithic culture was rural. If you consider this Indus Valley Civilization, there was surplus food grain production. In the Chalcolithic, there was subsistence agriculture. During this Indus Valley Civilization, people were aware about this bronze making, but in most of the Chalcolithic cultures, they were not aware of this bronze making. Indus Valley Civilization had particular script. They had this written records. We could not decipher, but they had. But if you consider this Chalcolithic culture, they did not have any script or written records. So if you consider this Chalcolithic culture, though most of the sites belong to this later period, means post-Harappan culture, but technologically they are pre-Harappan culture. End of the Chalcolithic culture. Chalcolithic culture started fading from this 1200 BC, but completely disappeared or discontinued from 700 BC. Basically, this culture was based on this subsistence agriculture. So when there was decline in the rainfall, culture was ended. Not suddenly, but gradually. So what is the importance of this Chalcolithic culture or Chalcolithic phase? This was the first time we have used this first metal, that is copper. We have also considered this Chalcolithic site as a first large villages foundation during this period. Even though we have started making this pottery during this Neolithic phase, this time we have first time used this painted pottery. We have started this agriculture during this Neolithic culture, but during this time they cultivated more cereals than Neolithic community. These are the important features, but what is limitation? First of all, rural settlement, they never reach urbanization. Only few sites like this Daimabad reach this almost urbanization, but not complete urbanization. They did not practice any intensive or extensive cultivation. Even they did not use this plow or hoe. Next is no full use of animal. They did not use animal for milk or milk product. They lacked this technique of mixing tin with copper to produce this bronze. Next is technologically backward. We have already seen most of the Chalcolithic sites are post-Harappan, but technologically they are pre-Harappan. They did not know how to mix this tin with copper and produce this bronze. They did not know about the writing and all these things, and they have this high infant mortality rate. Though they have cultivated more cereals than this Neolithic time, we have found this evidence of high infant mortality rate from this Maharashtra. We have found the large burials of children. It may be various reasons, but one of the reason can be absence of medical knowledge. So basically we can see this Chalcolithic culture, though it is important, it was contemporary to Harappan culture as well as after the Harappan culture and before. Though most of the sites are from post-Harappan culture, they did not take substantial benefit from this Harappan culture. They did not learn about this bronze making or art of writing, etc. They never reached this urbanization. So now in last lecture we have seen all the characteristics feature of this Paleolithic, Mesolithic and Neolithic site. Now in this lecture we have completely covered this Chalcolithic age or Chalcolithic culture. You have to remember a few basic points. What are their characters, which are the sites, important sites, their location, their states, and on which river they are located. Like question can be like Chalcolithic sites and then state, or Chalcolithic sites, states and river on which they are located. They can give directly any site like Ahar site, Inamgaon or Navdatoli, etc. You have to remember few important points like Navdatoli, where we can find almost all food grains. Then Ahar and Gilun, both sites are famous for the copper. We have also found the bronze in Daimabad and Ahar. We have most of the sites are having this rural settlement, but like this Daimabad has reached almost urbanization. You just have to remember certain points and basic characteristics or feature. With this knowledge you can solve most of the questions which are going to ask in UPSC or state PCS exam. In the next lecture we will come up with the next topic. Until then, goodbye.